Welcome back to the podcast of Fairview Church. I'm here with Pastor John. Pastor John, say something. Give us a hello.
Hello.
Thank you. You did exactly what I asked you to do. And I'm Pastor Tyler. We are continuing our series, our thought process in a few episodes of what you need to know. And let me introduce you to what you need to know for this episode. But before, very quickly, let me just remind all of our hearers, all of those who have been listening and will continue to listen, that we have an upcoming episode that we need their help with, and it is an Ask the Pastor episode. Now, we've been very clear on last episodes that, Pastor John, you're the one who needs all this information.
Correct. Please send me that information so I can compile a list, and then we will, depending on time's sake, we'll choose some from that list. But yeah, please send them to me at jspolino@myfavorite.org.
Questions that could have short answers or questions that could need a long, lengthy answer. Right. We're good for anything. We're just looking for content and involvement from our folks as to questions they're asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and that's coming up soon. We'll have a date for that coming soon, but we just know that is coming ahead or coming up. What we are headed into today is what you need to know, and we're going to be looking at a historical character of church life, what you need to know about John Bunyan.
John Bunyan.
Do you want to introduce us to John Bunyan as opposed to how Pastor Devin thought that we were going to be talking about Mr. Bunyan?
Sure. So John Bunyan is not Paul Bunyan,
right?
Who was the lumberjack with the blue ox. John Bunyan was a Christian figure. He was a preacher. He was a Puritan, Baptist, but maybe pre-Baptist type of figure that lived in predominantly the middle 1600s, so middle 17th century. And there's a couple of things about him that you should know as just like a person. I want to get to his most famous work as like the highlight of this episode. But a couple of things you need to know about him is that he served in the English Civil War that was there. During that time, there was also some back and forth within England at the time as far as state religion and what was allowed to be preached or taught. And so John Bunyan was actually imprisoned for the first time for at least 12 years, where he actually supported his family by making and selling shoelaces while he was in prison. And he did that. He was in prison because he preached without a license. He preached the gospel outside of the English church at the time, and so they imprisoned him for that. And so he sold shoelaces, supported his family.
So can I ask you just a question real quick? So I'm capturing all this context as you're laying it down. We're talking about that 17th century, mid 1600s, as you're talking about, and there was, unlike America today, there was in England a Church of England, an established state church that existed, which is why you had to have a license to preach. You had to be ordained in the state church in order to be, given the approval, if you will, to preach. And John Bunyan didn't do that.
Correct.
That comes into what you said earlier. He was a Puritan. Some of that element that there were some things he agreed and disagreed with the Church of England, and that's why he finds himself in that situation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and the term that they would have used in more of like, at least from the English side of things, they would have called him a nonconformist. So, that's kind of the more like derogatory type of insult that they would have given him. Puritan's the nice way of saying it. These are folks, just gives a little bit of a history lesson. You had the Reformation that happened. And so you had a lot of these reform groups, and there was some tension and some, big wars and battles, or at least not battles, but seasons where Catholicism and then like the Reformation Protestant movement were taking control here and there. And then you have the booming of the English church. And then even after that, you have a movement called the Puritans who are looking at and saying, what, I don't think the reforms went far enough. I think there are still some things there that needed reform. And that is where it's kind of getting in some of the tension of, that's what they call them, nonconformists, because the English church is saying, hey, we are the Reformed church, and then he's saying, but I don't know if you went far enough. And so that's where that tension goes.
So we have John Bunyan that's, just a little over 100 years after Reformation time period, 100 plus years. And so still fairly new.
Yes.
Still really fresh and a lot of tension as you're talking about. And so here we got John Bunyan that has, and last thing you said was he's arrested. He's arrested for preaching the gospel.
Yeah, so he's arrested for preaching the gospel. And I should back up just a little bit. He wasn't always devoted to following Christ. It's actually really interesting. His first wife, we don't actually know her name, but we do know that she was a devout believer, and she had 2 books, Christian books, that she loved and was really helpful in her own journey. And she passed away, and they had 4 children together. One of them was blind, and so he had a lot of in his writings he talks about that particular daughter. But through that all, he read those 2 books, and he was like transformed as well. And so it was one of those things where it was through the ministry of his wife where he became to really follow Christ, fall in love with the Word.
Wow.
And part of that was because he always struggled with his own sin, and so he had this.
So he wasn't a believer then when they got married.
We're not sure about that.
She at least led him into that journey.
Yeah. So we're not sure about what his state was before then, but I do know that she was significant in his transformation when it comes to his faith in Christ.
So at least in the 20s, because we talked earlier, he served military.
Yeah.
He did military duty. So we're at least talking about post-teenage years.
Correct.
Early adulthood that this process would happen.
Correct,
okay.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about it is, so he goes through this journey. He's wrestling with his sin. Now he gets he's on fire for the Lord. He's preaching the gospel. He loves the Bible. He loves the Word. It's not going to stop him from teaching the gospel,
right?
Because he doesn't have the right permit or whatever they needed. And he gets put in jail. He's supporting his family by making shoelaces, but he's also doing something else. He's actually writing books. And because of his own journey of struggling with sin and struggling with his own Christian life, looking back, in his whole entire life, he writes this beautiful book called The Pilgrim's Progress, which is a allegorical storytelling of a man named Christian who starts off in this kind of city that would be everyday, kind of pagan city, right? And he hears the message of the good news that there is a kingdom that awaits, a celestial city into the future. But the journey is hard and it's difficult. And sometimes the way is not clearly seen. And so he embarks on this journey to find what he's longing for, which is salvation, which is the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of starts that. But we can go into a little bit more about the book itself. So that's the big his magnum opus is the Pilgrim's Progress.
Well, an allegorical story. I mean, we don't really find a lot of those these days, or at least it's not a main type of literature that's produced. But you have to read that book because it's an allegory just a little differently than you do other type literature. And so you're reading it through the experiences of this character by the name of Christian. But what you're talking about is as he leaves this pagan city and he goes into the journey towards the celestial city, he engages all these things that are synonymous with his sin, the problems that he struggled with, but also the encouragement of perseverance and the things or the ways that you go through that journey of sin. Would that that's a fair assessment? It's been many years since I read.
Yeah, and what I love about it is like each chapter or each section is divided up into something that all of us experience. And so there is a moment in his life where Christian is experiencing self-doubt. Or there's one scene in the book where he's experiencing the weight of the law and Pharisaicalism.
Wow.
And the whole journey, he actually has this weight on his back that he's carrying, which is a really cool metaphor of his sin. And it doesn't fall off until the very end. Spoiler alert, but this has been around for hundreds of years. So I'm sorry if I ruined that for you. But it is a beautiful...
Victory in Jesus. Yeah, it's true.
It's great. But he walks through aspects of doubt, persecution, There's a section of the book where he's confronted with the pleasures of life and how easy it would be just to be comfortable.
Wow.
He walks through, some of the agonizing pain of being too critical even on yourself. And so it hits a lot of different avenues of the Christian life that I think if someone were to pick it up and read it, they would be just astounded by the similarities of their own Christian journey.
Sure.
And then the very end of the book, and I won't give this away, but there's like one last obstacle that must happen. And it is honestly depicting a real life, I'm giving up my life and trusting my whole life to God. And you see throughout this Pilgrim Progress help along the way. And so you see him run into a man named Evangelist, right?
Yes.
And you see him run into a man named Compassion. And so there's aspects of which you see the Christian community discipling him along the way and helping him along the way. But at the same time, he runs into characters that are not going to help him either. And so it's just a really amazing story that's put together. Now, what's really cool about this story is he wrote part number 1, which is Christian's story. But at the very beginning of the book, he talks about Christian being married. And he actually wrote a second part to this book that a lot of people don't really read, or at least it's not the most famous part.
Is it in the Pilgrim's Progress, or is that a separate book if you purchase it? Do you know?
I'm actually not sure, to be honest with you, because I've only read that Pilgrim's Progress as far as like the part number 1. But it's actually following the wife's journey. And so he wrote a second little tidbit on that. But
wow.
Yeah.
So John Bunyan comes to us as a character who obviously became a Christian, had in his own life persecution, suffering, affliction. That's from external things. That's reflected in the book. Internally, he struggled with his own sin. He struggled with his own journey in Christ. And then even the dynamics of he lost a wife.
Yep.
He saw the suffering that one of his children went through that was pretty significant compared to his other kids.
Right.
And then all of that produces this, what is really still a go-to book for Christians today.
Yeah, this is a classical piece of Christian literature that, to me, is one that I think everyone should read, at least the first part on Christian's journey. And it really became the text that set up what we consider to be more of a healthy way of self-reflection. And so, like, once you start to read this book, you will start to really reflect on yourself. And to me, I remember reading it for the first time. I was in college, and I remember thinking to myself, I've really never thought about how pride can be so damaging to me as a believer.
Yeah.
And again, there's just aspects to the book that are just phenomenal. It's a really great read, really good poetry. So if you're someone who likes poetry, like one of the quotes I've used in a sermon before comes from the Pilgrim Progress. This hill, though high, I covet to ascend. The difficulty will not me offend, for I perceive the way of life lies there. So you get a lot of description of, in the end, it's worth it to persevere.
Wow.
In the end, it's worth it to get through these trials. In the end, it's worth it to say no to self. In the end, it's worth it even to say no to the crowds that are cheering for you to go in the other direction. In the end, it's worth it because you have this celestial city and a king that that wants you to belong and has made the way for you to get there. And so it's just a beautiful piece of literature that I just wanted to share. Again, it's a church figure that we don't normally talk about, but one that we should engage in as it's part of our church history. It's part of our upbringing and spirituality as far as that's concerned.
Well, that is what you need to know
about
John Bunyan. Any just other tidbits of, hey, here's a fun fact. If
yes,
not, that's okay.
I do. So 4 distinct Christian figures attribute their formation to John Bunyan.
Really?
And you may know some of these. First one, Charles Spurgeon.
Heard that name.
Second, C.S. Lewis.
Yep, got that one too.
George Whitefield.
Yes.
And John Wesley.
I'm pretty confident all 4 of them I've heard before.
And if you are a student of church history, you know that all 4 of those men made tremendous influence on Christian philosophy, biblical teaching, methodology, all sorts of things.
Yes.
And they were all influenced by this work that John Bunyan created.
Wow.
So,
Well, and all of those were not peers of John Bunyan. Mm-hmm. They all were after his life and legacy. And that's phenomenal. You just never know what your work now will do to influence others. Yeah. Either as peers or later in life.
Yep.
Wow. Well, Pastor John, thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We do not get proceeds for any of the book sales that may come from this episode, but that's not the point. We're asking you to get the book.
Sure.
Read the book, enjoy the book, learn from what many, I would dare to say thousands of other believers have journeyed through and experienced and appreciated from John Bunyan's work.
Absolutely.
Pilgrim's Progress.
Pilgrim's Progress.
Well, thank you all. Until next time, have a great day.